Temperatures went up real fast, real high, and there were a lot of problems for animals and plant life. But look what happened. All of a sudden you get an overall downward trend to today. Way up there to down here. Planet is not warming right now. Overall, it's cooling. Cooling considerably, scarily. Look at the carbon dioxide levels. 3,000 parts per million. At the end of this Eocene, which was when mammals evolved, there was, as you know, a massive die-off of dinosaurs here at the 65 million years ago mark. That was the asteroid that killed all the dinosaurs. It took quite a while for plant and animal life to regain itself. This is pretty much the golden age of mammals right here. 1,600 parts per million at the end of it, 3,000 at the beginning, temperatures much higher than today, mammals surviving quite well. Today, 388 parts per million of carbon dioxide. Temperature way below what it was 55 million years ago. The Eocene, the era I was just talking about, 55 to 33 million years ago, temperatures 10 to 15 degrees Celsius higher than today. CO2 levels, as I showed you, 3,000 to 600 parts per million. Today, our alarmists tell us that would mean oblivion. Didn't mean oblivion for the critters that were living there at that time. There's one of those idealized portraits, but nonetheless. This is from Tim Flannery. He wrote The Weather Makers, which is kind of what I call an ultra-alarmist text. But before that, he wrote a really nice book called The Eternal Frontier. It's a kind of biological, geological history of North America. I guess what he says about the Eocene. When the Earth is warm in greenhouse mode, as it was around 50 million years ago, North America is a verdant and productive land. Almost all of its 24 million square kilometers from Ellesmere Island in the north to Panama in the south is covered with luxuriant vegetation. So this is what we have to fear, apparently. High CO2 levels, high temperatures, for some strange reason, it's paradise. And that's the chapter that I took that quote from, in which America becomes a tropical paradise. So this is the oblivion that we're being told to fear. And Flannery is one of the worst offenders in this. He's a complete alarmist. So we're not in paradise right now. We are in the interglacial of, the warm part of an ice age, and we should be very grateful indeed. Take a look at this line. This is called the glacial threshold. This is the point at which the planet goes into icing. Look at these little dots at the top. Those are the interglacial periods. Interglacial periods last about 10, 15 to 20,000 years in a 100,000 year cycle. The glacial periods, when the Earth is covered with ice, at least the northern hemisphere is, that's more like 80 to 85,000 years. So 80 to 85% of the time in the last million years, the planet has been more or less covered with ice. Not completely, but largely. And look at how close we are. Look at how close we are to going back into another cooling period. All we have to do is go down about 4 or 5 degrees Celsius and we will be back in an ice age. And I'll show you what that means for us in a minute. So note that in the 4 previous interglacials, they come about every 100,000 years, they were warmer than today. Ours is here right now. That was the previous one, there, and so on. This one lasted a bit longer than most, lasted about 28,000 years. Most of them are considerably shorter. Note that the glacial depths are getting cooler as well. So the planet is not heading toward uncontrolled warming, it's heading toward 250 million years ago cooling. The Eemian interglacial, 125,000 years ago, temperatures 1 to 3 degrees Celsius warmer than today. Hippopotamuses lived in Britain. Sea levels were about 14 to 20 feet higher than today. I'm not saying this. The source is the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, a warmist organization, not a skeptical organization. Previous interglacial, 1 to 3 degrees warmer. Sea levels, 4 to 6 meters or 14 to 20 feet higher. No humans were involved in the Eemian warming. We hadn't even evolved yet. Oh, no, I'm sorry. That's not quite right. What I meant is that we hadn't evolved into Homo sapiens yet. We hadn't developed fire. We hadn't developed agriculture. We had no effect on that one whatsoever. We were not the cause. Interglacials before the Eemian interglacial were even warmer, with sea levels up to 50 feet higher, and maybe even higher than that. During interglacials, glaciers melt and sea levels rise naturally. Now, we're told that if the glaciers melt and the sea levels rise, it's all our fault. But I think you can see from this that if the glaciers melt and sea levels rise, it's because we're in an interglacial. They're going to rise no matter what we do. Glaciers will melt no matter what we do, whether we were here or not. To feel guilty about this is insane. Here's what the world looks like in the last glacial, the one that ended 15,000 years ago. See much Canada there? That line here is the ice. And you might say, oh, well, yeah, but look at all this. But a lot of this is sort of tundra and scrub. It's not exactly productive land at this point. So if we have another ice age, there will be, as you can see, no Canada. Canada's pretty much gone, under about 2 miles of ice, and we're all going to be living in Mexico. All right, the planet is cold, not warm. Here's another quote from a textbook on climate. Again, not a skeptical one. We tend to think of our time as normal, but this is not the case. Most of the time, our planet has been considerably warmer than it is today. For most of its life, for example, Earth has been largely free of permanent year-round ice. So the Arctic ice cap, quite unusual. It's only existed for about the last 3 million years. The Antarctic ice cap has only existed for about 14 million years ago. 14 million years ago, there were still plants and animals on Antarctica. 40 million years ago, Antarctica was a tropical paradise. So if we lose our ice, well, it's not oblivion. It's just a different planet, different climate. In other words, what global warming alarmists call oblivion or thermogeddon is the condition under which most plant and animal life has evolved over the last 250 million years and longer. Fears of oblivion are absurd. And here's a quote to sort of support that. Among the thousands of human generations, ours must be the first that was ever frightened by warming. I can tell you that in the history, in the time that humans have developed agriculture and so on, warming times over the last, say, 8 to 10,000 years have always been better than cooling times. Our interglacial Holocene began about 15,000 years ago. Glaciers last, I've said to you, 80 to 90,000 years. Interglacials, 10 to 20,000 years. But here's the point. We are well past the best before date for our interglacial. Well past. In other words, our planet is heading toward cold, not greater warm. All right. Here's why, far from causing oblivion, more carbon emissions might actually be good for the environment and for humans. I'll tell you one reason right now I don't have on the slides, I don't think, is that if carbon dioxide does keep us a bit warmer, then we might be glad to have it, rather than going into this glacial phase, which we are inevitably heading toward. It might prevent it or forestall it a few years, a few thousand years maybe even. But here's why. One, carbon curbs will damage our economy. Nobody doubts this. At least nobody who's got any serious economic chops doubts this. Only strong economies can afford environmental protections. The stronger our economy, the better poised we are to deal with global warming or global cooling. Also, the stronger the economy, the more we can protect the environment. Environmental protection is incredibly expensive. If we wreck our economy with these carbon schemes, we are going to reduce our opportunities for protecting the environment. Second reason is this. Carbon dioxide is really good for plants. Double level of carbon dioxide, that is to say around 800 parts per million, would increase plant growth by up to 33%. The source on this, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. Even they agree on this. Greenhouse growers put 1,000 to 1,200 parts per million of carbon dioxide into their greenhouses. Why? Because it helps the plants to grow. So more carbon dioxide doesn't mean we're going to have an obliviated, devastated planet. It means we're going to have a greener planet. Furthermore, Rudiman, who is one of the warmest climatologists, has said that a warmer planet will be a wetter planet. So you can figure that we're going to be a planet, if we warm up a bit, that's going to be warmer. It's going to be wetter because the warmth pulls the water out of the oceans. There'll be more water in the air. And it's going to be greener because the plants will grow better. Carbon dioxide is a plant fertilizer.